Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for waiting. Thank you for being here and joining me. Last time that we are at a weird time or later time than usual. Those were some very interesting days, yesterday and today. And so we will be back to our regular programming, so to speak, at 5 p.m. Eastern. Thank you again for joining me. I truly appreciate it. And please comment, like, share. Yes, of course, please do so. But most importantly, share your opinions, ask questions. So we cruise through all of those news today together. And of course, we're going to focus on national and global news. We will begin, though, first and foremost with a tribute to an icon and a legend that unfortunately we lost today. Today, the world mourns one of the greatest guardians, Jane Goodall, who passed away today at the age of 91. Her life's work is a testament to curiosity, compassion, and courage. And from her earliest days observing chimpanzees in Gombe, she revealed to humanity that the line between species is thinner we ever imagined. Her discoveries reshaped not only science, but our relationship with the natural world. And this video, I think, became the most famous one when she was departing the area where she took care of chimpanzees, and one even decided to give her a hug. Take a look. As you see here, you can just observe. It's a very iconic video. I think it went viral for all the right reasons before the videos went viral, as they go viral today. You can take a look right here. And Jane was more than a scientist. She was a voice for hope. Well into her 90s, she traveled, spoke, wrote, and inspired millions to believe in a shared responsibility for all life. And may we carry her legacy forward to observe more, to protect more, and to believe more in our capacity for kindness. I was honored to cover a session between former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Jane Goodall just about a year ago at the last CGI, Clinton Global Initiative 2024. I did cover this year, and I'll talk more about that throughout this week. But last year was a session with her and about her and her vision, and her really asking us to start caring about our only home, our planet. And lastly, I want to share a quote by Jane Goodall. She said, "How is it possible that the most intellectual creature to ever walk planet Earth is destroying its only home?" And I think this really is a very valid question, especially as we experiencing so many changes all around the world. Priorities do change because of the man-inflicted conflict, but also our priorities when it comes to budget do change. Where do we allocate it? And it seems like we're now sponsoring more what ultimately causes harm than the reverse, right? Speaking of the budget, government shutdown began at midnight last night. More than 750,000 federal workers are being furloughed. Others, including active duty troops and law enforcement officers, will continue working, though many will stop receiving paychecks. And here's a bit of a rundown. So, travel impact. If you are traveling, I was traveling today. I did not see any longer lines, but this was very early morning today. So, airports do remain open. Air traffic controllers and TSA agents are still on duty, but longer lines are expected. Now, as to benefits, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid through year end will continue uninterrupted. And again, it all is about how long this shutdown will last, right? Because this will be uninterrupted till the end of this year. Now, economic cost, the shutdown will cost an estimated $400 million a day. The last one also under President Trump. Yet the last two, in fact, were under Trump. One was 8 days, another was 35 days, which is the longest shutdown in American history. This was in 2018, 2019, remember December, January. And that shutdown did cost us $11 billion. So we'll see how long this lasts. But I want to also mention beyond the economics, right, and the impact on what we're losing. And what do we mean by that? We're losing what we're not producing, what we're not selling, the workers not showing up to work, not right when it comes to labor unions, right? So we are at standstill. And so when we're at standstill, we are losing money, of course. Then the question is also about ethics, right? If we demand TSA workers and those who are being promised that they will be paid later, to show up unpaid essentially now with no security as to how long this will last, they can also call in sick, right? And that's exactly what happened in 2019, which caused Trump then to go back and start negotiating. Will this happen here? That's an interesting moment. And we're getting closer to holiday season. And I do not see any willingness from the Republican Party to negotiate. Yes, we saw Vice President Vance joining the White House press briefing today. I don't want to show you videos or have readouts because it was more of a performance. What struck me was that, in fact, we didn't see Mike Pence, Vice President Mike Pence, that much as we see Vance now within just the last 8 months. And so he was positioned to be this sort of voice of reason, calling just upon the Democrats to essentially surrender and accept the terms because, as he phrased it, the Democrats are holding our entire country hostage. And then he talked about Democratic propaganda. And he talked about Democrats not willing to obey and just stick with the Republicans. And then when he was asked how long this will take, he said, well, we see some cracks in the Democratic Party. And he was referring, of course, to some who switched the side, and 3 of them voted in favor of this budget. And it's like, well, it's cracking. So we think this will come sooner than we expect. But there was nothing in terms of negotiating. Instead, when he was asked about AI-generated video that President Trump posted, laughing at the minority leader Jeffries and Schumer, Senator Schumer, just positioning them, first of all, the text that the AI, installed into Schumer's whatever picturesque appearance in that AI video was horrific, right? Calling Democrats pieces of whatever. And then Jeffries was, presented as being, I guess, Mexican. And so J.D. Vance, Vice President Vance, just laughed it off. He said, well, the president has great sense of humor and it's all fun and games. We're having a great time. And then the follow-up was, well, but you want to negotiate. How is this helping you negotiate? Okay, this was a follow-up. Bravo, media. But altogether, you let him talk about propaganda without any real follow-up. And why the heck are you talking about AI-generated videos? This is disgusting. And you should state that when you are on air or when you write your articles, you should say that this is disgusting. This is not the way that those in leadership should behave. And I would say the same thing if Democrats would do the same story, right? And talk about Trump being this and that and that. If you try to negotiate, you do it in good faith. And so many lives, literally lives, we're not exaggerating when we state that, so many lives are on the line. And that's what Democrats trying to bring across. So do bring it. It comes to Capitol Hill. When I was asking, is somebody there overnight? Nobody was there. But then the GOP leaders are somewhere almost on vacation, and Democrats are running across media, making media appearances. Maybe you should be coming close to people and start protesting or start involving people and start featuring people who will be hurt in this process. Start talking about the substance. Stop running around causing, or trying to get a media gig. It's not about media gigs. And some of them, AOC, for instance, she used her media wisely yesterday, went live on Instagram, was talking to her constituents essentially and explaining the situation. Some do. But then you see a great difference between the progressives, and I do not agree with everything, any party to begin with, but you see some on the younger side using media, rightfully so, and then those on the more experienced, so to speak, side using or turning towards legacy media, where legacy media is just talking about Shutdown as the next reality show that is premiering, and they're trying to advertise the Shutdown because as long as it takes, you will be switching on those channels and watching it, and you make them money because they make more on advertising the more people watch it. So I don't see real questions, and I don't see real negotiations happening. And I will just underline it, exactly what I said yesterday, exactly what I said last week and the weeks before. We need to go by the rules. We need to enforce the rules that we imposed upon us. When somebody's violating somebody's territory, it's violation. You are invading. You're not a welcomed guest. So you get a warning, and then you get this and you get that. It's very simple, right? The same story is here. Negotiation is, in my understanding, and I think according to the rules, means two parties are coming here trying to find a common ground. It's give and take. It's not I win, you lose. But what we hear is I win, you lose from the administration. But then when it comes to press releases, it's just positions that radical left is holding the country hostage and is not willing to negotiate. But then you are not really negotiating. And I wish this would be stressed in the media, because it has to come down to the mega community understanding what is at stake and what's going on, because they, believe it or not, will be first in line to be affected. But altogether, I'm global news analyst, right? That's how I'm introduced when I'm on BBC or whatnot. So, which I'm very grateful and honored for. Globally seen. What does it tell our allies after 8 months of turbulence caused by unnecessary tariffs that go, again, against the rules as to Economy 101, what tariffs are and whom they hurt and benefit? After this, after ensuring that they spend 5% of their GDP on military equipment that we are now selling for more, adding 10% markup and giggling about it. Hint at that great sense of humor. After those interesting conversations at the UN, promoting nationalistic approach, isolationism, after all that, now we are shutting down and we stop discussion on tariffs and trade and whatnot. But on the other hand, we're not stopping to build the ballroom. We're not stopping the ICE operations. We're not stopping renovation of the White House and the Gilded Age Hobby Lobby decorations. This is not stopping. But other things are stopping, like $18 billion to New York, because Schumer is from New York, and we get that point. So what does it do to our reputation? And also, shutdowns never follow a script. Remember that, right? Many agencies only set plans yesterday. Agencies that are controlled by administration set plans a week ago. The plans were not about placing folks on leave. They were about firing people. Like State Department, 16,000, we'll let you go. Out of 16,000, 10,000, they let them go, 6,000 they keep, and whatnot. You have to see beyond the surface what is happening during this shutdown and whom this will benefit and how it will be explained and, yes, sold to the population. So you need to reach across the aisle and explain. As much as you hate it, as much as you're over it. I mean, if you want to be in a functioning democracy, seeking bipartisan solutions, you have to start acting that way. Or you're going towards civil war. Are you ready for it? Who's going to fight? Who's going to go? Who's going to, right? Because at this point, and again, I'm not advocating for any wars. I'm advocating against it. The last thing I want for us to have any kind of stuff of such kind in our country. I think we're better than that. I think we're more dignified than that. But then if you don't do the necessary steps now, turn it back into the drones invading sovereign territories. If we see those rules, very clear territorial limitations, as unnecessary burden, as a murky area, next thing, you're going to have missiles. Next thing, they start hitting things. And then what you're going to do? Then you will be fighting. Are you ready for it? And that works on all levels, not just on global levels, but also national levels. So at this point, I understand the Democratic Party and the Democrats that are representing the party, standing the ground, putting the issue forward. I applaud it. This is great. That's why we're talking about it. What are you going to do next? You can demand certain files to be released, so you will be up for negotiation. You have the cards. Remember the cards? The conversation with Trump and Zelensky about cards? Democrats have all the cards now. Will they do? Will they not? Hey, Sean. Hello. Happy shutdown day. Yes. Obey. Yes. Hey, James. Yeah. Will they obey? Will they just agree with us? And he made this whole case. And this struck me. Listen, I was watching this on the flight. And I was kind of looking at everybody's screens, everybody at CNN. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting crowd here. And the whole idea was to present Vance as this poised, well-spoken voice of reason. He's saying Trump has sense of humor, but it's done also with a little giggle. Democrats are nonsense, the lunatics, the, radical left, crazy people. But he is here to seek solutions. And for that, Democrats have to obey, by what? Because we created this big, beautiful, ugly bill. And we want to give everybody insurance and da-da-da. So the talk is really great. It's the same story when I was listening exactly less than a week ago to Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, introducing President Macron at that MAGA dinner. He said all the right things. He said, almost like running for Miss Universe, world freedom, and I believe in peace, world freedom, beauty for all, food for everybody, blah. But then look what they do, because the talk is great. And Vance was sort of like a very focused on him, situation, which is very uncommon. Listen, I covered the White House. It's very uncommon that the vice president is coming up and talks about, current state of affairs, and he made jokes. He's like, Caroline, how do you decide whom to give the chance to ask a question? Shall I go by who's best dressed? We're in the middle of shutdown. Best dressed? What are you talking about? Hey, Ignacio. Hello. Happy lobby. Trump will be in a wheelchair drinking Adderall fish delights through a straw by Christmas. James says targeted furloughs. Yeah, DOD contemplating polygraphs. Yes, we're going to talk about it. Hi, Morgan. Hello. It's going to take the next Democrat decade to set the righteous Donnie on the ground. Thank you, Sean. I agree. But then you're in Canada, right? Do you think it will be enough for the next administration to say the opposite for, in this case, Canadians to start trusting the United States? Because what we saw is that the system is so fragile and broken that one can do this and another can do completely the opposite. But when you place orders, for instance, for military equipment like F-35s that Canada is now weighing in, right? Thinking, are we going to buy? Are we not? I hope not, but who knows? Okay, you do you. So this is placed for decades to come. It's not done within, it's not, the order is not accepted, fulfilled, and delivered within one term. It rarely happens. So, right, or being part of Golden Dome, imagine it was Biden's idea and you signed up for it. And then Trump comes in and says, well, the bill is now 10 times more. What you going to do? Right? And the terms are as such that you can't back down. So I think the problem here is that we saw through the cracks in the system that it can be so different, right? Of course, I understand that Republicans have different priorities, different policies that they prioritize and bring forth. Democrats completely different in some ways, right? There are always those issues when we talk about abortion, when you talk about, voting, when we talk about. So it's there's always some type of negotiation and some type of argument, even. But it was never going from a democracy to a nationalistic, isolationist pariah within 8 months. So here's the question about the system. How sustainable is it? How can we trust you if any time you can just go berserk? So that is, I think, the question here. Hey, Thomas, late to the show, catching up. I just literally joined like 23 minutes ago. So thank you for being here. Okay. Let's talk about Pfizer's deal. Pfizer made a deal with Trump. So we have heard that the president wants to impose 100% tariffs on pharma industry. And then Pfizer did not announce any increase in pricing, anything. And then the question was, what's happening with Pfizer? And then it came out that they struck the deal with Trump. So the drug maker will lower prices on some medications in the US and will invest $70 billion in domestic drug manufacturing, but it's over the years. In exchange, Pfizer earns a 3-year reprieve from Trump's planned 100% tariffs in pharma sector. So if you let the president keep a stake, then you're off the hook. It's very interesting. Discounted drugs by Pfizer will be sold directly through a new Trump RX website. Pfizer's stock jumped about 7% after the announcement. And here's your direct view at the market, because we're so we value the markets, right? Markets goes up, market goes down. What do they value? They value their own profits. And if they see that, we're in there's some type of socialism, or I don't know, because it's state-owned companies at this point. Of course, they will invest in that. If the state is invested, obviously, Trump wants to make money, so he will bring this TrumpRx.com forth and ensure that it's profitable. Of course, they start investing in it and be behind it. But just understand, their profits is their priority, not your well-being, not my well-being. Who gives a shit? Now, as to Pentagon tightening secrecy, and who mentioned that? James, yes, thank you for mentioning that. So the Pentagon is preparing to require strict non-disclosure agreements and random polygraph testing for personnel within the Office of the Defense Secretary, or now it's Secretary of War, and the Joint Staff, according to the Washington Post. All service members, civilian employees, and contractors in these offices would have to sign an agreement barring release of any non-public information without explicit approval. So, loyalty. One word, loyalty. And if you fail your loyalty test, which is sort of a daily occurrence, I think, the way I understand it, then you will face consequences, and they will know directly who was that person. Meanwhile, at the Copenhagen Competitiveness Summit, as you see here, European leaders and executives from 28 of the continent's largest firms issued a joint call for simplified regulations, investment in innovation, and accelerated decarbonization. President Macron declared further simplify and lower barriers in the European internal market, support innovation and investment, continue decarbonization, assert the European preference. This is our course for a more competitive and more sovereign Europe. And then he warned bluntly. He said, quote, "We are in a confrontation with Russia." Macron emphasized that Russia's aggression and hybrid attacks have escalated to the point where Europe must prepare both to defend and retaliate. France continues to position itself as a strategic leader in opposing Moscow. France also seized today the shadow tanker Pushpa, the suspected for launching drones that shut down Copenhagen airport last week. And I do have a video to show you exactly how they did it. Take a look. Anywho, long video. You got the point. But on the other hand, remember yesterday we were so excited to use the frozen assets, Russian frozen assets, to rebuild Ukraine. And Ursula von der Leyen, the president of European Commission, heavily advocating for it, and everybody was so on board. Well, that conference in Copenhagen began with Macron stating this. He opposes the EU plan to provide Ukraine with 140 billion euro loan from frozen Russian assets, warning, quote, "When assets are frozen, international law must be respected." I do have some questions here. When Russia bombs civilians every day, at this point, 643 children, Ukrainian children died, 2,200 are injured, 20,000 children deported. And we're just talking about children. We're not talking about male population of Ukraine. We're not talking about female population of Ukraine. Just children. How's that with international law? I don't even say this is violation. This is complete disrespect of any type of law. Wouldn't you say that? Moscow countermoves. The Kremlin threatened to nationalize Western assets in Russia. And that's why Macron said that about the 140 billion euros, because he got calls from his companies in France saying, don't do it. Russia is about to nationalize everything. So that's what Kremlin said. Well, they will nationalize the Western assets if Brussels seizes frozen Russian central bank reserves. Targets include Unicredit, Raiffeisen Bank, PepsiCo, and Mondelez. The EU has already sent 4 billion euros of frozen Russian assets to Ukraine, half for drone production. But again, the plug is being pulled by President Macron. Now, as to security flashpoints, false attack fears are here because Russia is talking about Ukraine doing a false flag operation, and we're so much better than believing into that because we saw Russia doing exactly that same thing many times. So, the ISW, Institute of War, right, the International War, warns Russia and Belarus may stage a sabotage attack on Poland and blame Ukraine after Moscow preemptively accused Kiev of plotting one. right? And the Institute for War or for War, right? They are very careful with any warnings that they issue, to the point where they're being proven as one of the most reliable sources when it comes to intelligence. So, Poland, here you go. Drone incursions. We have new ones. Swarms of Russian drones breached German airspace. And in the morning, Germany said, oh, Russians again, you know. And then it turned out to be actually worse. Targeting shipyards, hospitals, refineries, and Hamburg airport supply lines. And if you know anything about geography, Hamburg is very, 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 very essential for Germany. Another Russian drone was found in Poland, 320 kilometers from Ukraine. France, meanwhile, arrested 11 suspects linked to Russia for Islamophobic and anti-Semitic attacks designed to inflame tensions. And that's what Russia does. Their propaganda looks very... it can even be something that is against Russia. They really don't give a rat's behind about that. The propaganda is very diverse. Like, for instance, yesterday, the head of Telegram channel, what's his name? Who was detained in France, right, for the propaganda issues and the secrecy within Telegram, and where French authorities had to really, dig into it and see what Telegram is doing, right, in terms of protecting channels that do spread, consciously so, spread propaganda. And so on the day of the elections in Moldova, he was talking all on X, retweeting Musk. Musk was retweeting him that the elections in Moldova are so infused by France and they're so directed by the Western countries that they try to achieve the result that they want to achieve in Moldova. And then the next day, right, and that's how propaganda works, he goes on the podcast with Lex Friedman. That's not Friedman is actually like a nickname, and guy is very much connected to FSB. He goes on his podcast and says, oh, Putin tried to poison me. And that's exactly how this propaganda works. So you will start questioning, right? It's never a clear picture that this guy is pro this or pro that. Look at Russia invading countries, killing children, killing civilians daily for years. And they're still explaining to you how they are a victim. And then Annalena Baerbock, the former foreign minister of Germany, who is headlining General Assembly at the UN, posted a big picture this morning, meeting Nebenza. Nebenza, who is the UN ambassador for Russia, the pig looking like. My inspiration behind this creation. She met with him and she said, well, we're discussing the plans because guess what? In October, that began today, Russia is headlining UN Security Council. So they will be determining the agenda, who speaks, what they speak about, when do they gather, this and that and the other. The country that has been violating UN Charter every single day since 2014 and way before. The country that completely ignored Ukraine. And if you think about demographics, who lost what and how during World War II, Ukraine had the most damage. Google it if you don't believe it, but we can dig into it if you want to. Completely ignoring that and claiming their seat in that UN Security Council after World War II. They just got it because of Soviet Union, but they are not Soviet Union. There were many countries that did not get the space at the Security Council, and still they're this permanent member with veto power. So Norway arrested 8 Chinese nationals flying a drone near Svolvær. So this, you see how it is connected. This was what we were discussing yesterday, right? Because when they say, well, there's this ship, right, that, for instance, one of them, the Shadow Fleet that Russia uses, right, that's the one that France sees today. They use those ships to send drones, right? So they use this thing as quite literally mothership. And the same story we experienced off the East Coast in the US 8 months ago. And I pointed to the interview with the drone expert who trains Ukrainian forces yesterday, right? And there, at that point, eight months ago, it was stated that this was Chinese doing, that mothership, and that they're testing and planning and whatever. And now you see that stuff is done in Europe. And when you think the drones, those are Shahed drones, those are, or Iran drones that are even already made in Russia, but they're facilitated with the Chinese abilities to launch them, right? Also, why does China do it? Because they gather intelligence, because they gather practice, because they will need it for Taiwan. So, but big news. The still stand is now no longer. So the still stand is being broken in Europe. The first drone has been shot, ladies and gentlemen. The Dutch Air Force F-35 opened the scoring by shooting down a Russian UAW. Congratulations. It has begun. Thankfully, finally, hello, Dutch forces. This was breaking news, by the way. Nuclear energy and Hungary. So check this out. Hungary's Orban is Putin's puppet. Yes, he is in European Union with veto power. Very much against Ukraine, very much pro-Putin, from whom he buys gas and everything, right? Very much friendly with Slovak leader Fico, who is also Putin's puppet. Great story. Orban has been giving interviews for the past 2 days, saying that Ukraine is no longer sovereign. Why? Because it came out that the Hungarian drones were flying inside Ukraine and sort of pinpointing Russians to bomb the American company that they didn't bomb in Ukraine a couple of weeks ago. And today comes out the European Court blocked 12.5 billion euros in funding for Hungary's planned PAX-2 nuclear reactors. So far, so good. But because it was blocked, you know what else we learned today? That these PAX-2 nuclear reactors are being built by Russia's Rosatom in Hungary. So EU was weighing in to invest 12.5 billion euros in a nuclear reactor or set of nuclear reactors in Hungary, built by Russia's Rosatom, national, right, state-owned company. And just because you rejected this investment, that's how we even found out. Why was this project allowed at all? We are at war. I mean, your speeches are great. And now the president of European Council, Ursula von der Leyen, seems to have a new favorite saying. She's like, Ukraine is the front line of our territory. You know, we have to strengthen Ukraine. They are our front line. Sounds fantastic. How is that aligning with your front line? Now, we survived, all of us as a global community survived the elections in Romania, right? Russians did not win there. We survived now recently the election in Moldova. Next thing that we have to get ready to survive are elections in Czech Republic. Petr Pavel, I know you like him. I know when I post his pictures, everybody is like, wee, giggly excited. Now, he stated today, he warned that the October 3rd, 4th, right, elections, because of time zone, will determine the nation's future. Quote, freedom, security, and the economy are at stake. He stressed reliance on EU and NATO allies as the safeguard against Moscow. So next elections are here. If you're in Czech Republic or maybe you're part of diaspora and you're voting from elsewhere, do the right thing, please. Because that really, your life depends on it, quite literally. As to military warnings, in France, General Pierre Schill, chief of staff, said French forces must be ready as early as tonight for potential high-intensity warfare to defend NATO ally. But if you read into his speech, this was said more in a context of you have to be prepared at all times. It was not an announcement that tonight something will happen, but very straightforward phrasing. In Lithuania, former President Dalia Grybauskaitė warned, quote, Putin will fight until the day he dies, unquote. Appeasement, she said, is a deadly mistake. And in Chernobyl, remember, yes, Chernobyl is not an active nuclear power plant, but it uses generators to maintain the facility, so to speak. Now, Russian shelling today caused a blackout at the containment facility isolating reactor 4. Specialists were working today to restore power. Why is it important? Because if it's not cooled down, if it's not maintained, it can get worse. But if we think about Zaporizhia nuclear plant, right, that the Russians seized and are also shelling and just trying to use that as one of the major threats. Now, if you compare that to Chernobyl, Zaporizhia is, according to Zelensky, is 6 times more, or it can cause 6 times more damage if that were, used by Russians as a way to hurt Europe and Ukraine and ultimately Eastern Europe. So that's what's at stake. Now, let's check your comments and we're going to talk about Venezuela. Sean says, is it possible for military to go on strike? Yes. I can't say anything. 8 generals, admirals were yesterday. They were essentially facing ultimatum. Do as I say or get out, lose your pension, lose your title. That's what at stake for them. But yeah, anything is possible. James says money gets more expensive expected human than human lives. Yes. Respect, not expensive. Yeah, money gets more respect than human lives. Yep, indeed. International law doesn't apply for terrorist state. Right, that's to Macron's point. Exactly. Hey, Martha, made it. We'll have to dip out when psychologists. Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you. James says, what the fuck? To what? What? Because all of it deserves this type of question follow-up. So let's talk about Venezuela. We bombed fishermen. I mean, we know it because their wives came searching for them and realized they never came back after going fishing. 5 boats of such. And the whole point was, we're not going to seek the regime change, right? Because U.S. sees Maduro as a legitimate leader. So did also the Biden administration. But certainly the former administration didn't take this type of steps. And so under this point of national security importance for United States, we're literally bombing these ships, very tiny vessels near Venezuela, claiming that they would have caused us a lot of harm through the drugs that they would brought in and whatnot. Then turns out they're fishermen. Then the Colombian president, whom I don't support because he is pro-Russia, but rightfully so, he said, well, we need to investigate it because you can't just bomb, ships in international waters and just portray that as some type of strength and a move of power or whatever. For that, his visa was taken away. He was sent out of the U.S. What do we find out today? New York Times reports Trump's advisors are weighing a military operation to remove Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is pushing the option, supported by CIA and DOJ. U.S. forces increased presence of 6,500 troops and deployed a naval flotilla in the Caribbean. Trump declared that UNGA, the U.S., has begun targeting Venezuelan terrorists and drug networks led by Maduro. Maduro now has declared state of emergency and placed his armed forces on combat alert. I don't think they're going to let American army and troops just march into Venezuela. They're going to hit it in a way. And then, yeah. But what does it look like? Are we now taking over Venezuela? Because that's an invasion. You don't agree with the dictator Maduro. And yes, he's a dictator. So you're going to, seize Venezuela? Is that what we're going to prioritize now instead of Eastern flank so Putin can do what he wants to do? Just a suggestion. And as to national quick news, farmers, we are farmers and we are screwed again. Farmers, especially those who voted for whatever they got, congratulations. The federal government shutdown, which began Wednesday, will stop some payments to farmers and delay access to federal loans, piling pressure on producers already facing low crop prices, record debt, and trade war during peak harvest. And also those infamous soybeans are now being bought from Argentinian farmers, whom we are now sponsoring with $20 billion buyout. as I mentioned, if you do care, stop worrying because the White House confirmed the construction of new ballroom will continue despite the shutdown. Now you can finally breathe. New York City funding withheld. The federal government is blocking $18 billion in New York City infrastructure projects, citing concerns over diversity, equity, and inclusion, according to OMB Director Russ Vought, also the creator of Project 2025. The DEI is sort of like Voldemort in Harry Potter, the thing that shall not be named. We just blame DEI for everything. And this was, you should have seen at UN, any meeting when this was mentioned that something is being cut for DEI, because translators had to go into diversity, inclusion, equity. They had to explain the words. And you should see people who got the translation. They're like, well, we're going to stop it because it promotes diversity, equity, and inclusion. People are like, did I hear it? Yeah. FBI and ADL split. The FBI said it has cut ties with Anti-Defamation League, the so-called ADL, after conservative backlash. Critics targeted the ADL for including activist Charlie Kirk's organization in its extremism glossary. And FBI's Kash Patel, the director of FBI, said that we're not going to partner with organizations that are extremists and like political pundits or something. He said to that notion that pretend to be watchdogs. As to U.S. and Canada defense deal, the State Department approved potential $1.75 billion sale of M142 HIMARS rocket systems and related equipment to Canada, the Pentagon announced Wednesday. I do think this is for Ukraine, because if I do connect the dots, yesterday I had a readout from Kiev where they said the next HIMARS will be coming from yada, 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 and Canada. I think that is for Ukraine. FCC impact. The Federal Communications Commission has furloughed 1,044 employees, which is 81% of the entire workforce, suspending most operations due to funding lapse. Vancouver-based Lithium Americas said that U.S. Department of Energy has acquired 5% stake in the company, plus 5% stake in its Thacker Pass Lithium JV with General Motors. So now international companies offering a cut to be able to operate here. That's an interesting development. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth plans to revise military complaint mechanism and loosen definitions around hazing, toxic leadership, discrimination, harassment, and abuse, according to the Washington Post. You ban the words, and it's sort of like with COVID, right? If you stop tracking it, it doesn't exist. DOE language ban. The Department of Energy has instructed employees to avoid using the terms such as, what do you think those terms are? Climate change, green, and sustainable. Department of Education. It's not easy being, you can't even say it anymore. NPR reported that. Health insurance cuts. CVS Health, Aetna, and Humana announced they will scale back Medicare Advantage offerings in 2026. Aetna will operate in 100 fewer counties, while Humana will reduce coverage from 89% to 85% of U.S. counties. And let me check that real quick. Tony, hi, Tony. That damn ballroom is still being worked on. Yes, it's bigger than the White House. I want to see some real polling data and what people think about. Nobody cares. You shall not think. So I'm kidding. You should think, obviously, and it's ridiculous. Socialism is why MAGA is going global. Yeah, James, I agree. And I mean, they fight it and then they promote it, and I don't know. Now, Ukraine. Today, Ukraine, I wouldn't say celebrated, but marked the Day of Defenders. It's a holiday, national holiday. On the Day of Defenders of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky presented state awards, battle flags to brigade commanders, and honorary ribbons for courage and bravery. Cadets of military took Lyceum cadet oath in the presence of top Ukrainian officials, Denmark's Minister for European Affairs, Marie Bier, European Commissioner Marta Koss, and foreign diplomats. Zelensky stated, quote, "Today is the day of millions. Those who dedicate their lives to Ukraine, who did not fear and did not betray, who dream of ending the war and act so that peace may come sooner." Unquote. He also signed decrees posthumously conferring the title of Hero of Ukraine to Andriy Parubiy. That's the essential member of Ukrainian parliament, or Rada, who was killed execution style recently. And Gennady Afanasyev, Stepan Chubenko, and Volodymyr Vakulenko. Since the full-scale invasion, 722 service members have received the honor, and 445, unfortunately, after their passing. So, meanwhile in Russia, oh, by the way, another thing I want to share, that Princess Anne, Princess Royal, has visited Kiev for the first time today, and especially on this day, marking the Day of National Heroes and Defenders in Ukraine. So take a look how this was.
Good afternoon. You're very welcome. Thanks so much.
Seems to be quite a challenge. Real visit. Told me. We had previous experience can help.
Not very long, but it's tragedy, it's not the experience.
But everybody else has to listen as well. And there's only so much we can do.
I love how humble she's. Like, she's very dressed down, and thank you. All we can say. Meanwhile, in Russia, they're militarizing. Guess what? No, not animals yet. Childhood. Why would you need to have childhood? You need to fight. Russia is accelerating the militarization of children, replacing childhood with discipline and combat training. Propagandist Vladimir Solovyov, the one who spills bullshit on television, said that Russian kids will fight after their fathers, praising war-themed games like Tsarnitsa and prepare youth for combat. Quote, "Let the West watch and know that sons and daughters will stand in line behind their fathers. The era of pink ponies is over." Unquote. He has houses in Italy, and often he complains that he can't visit them any longer because he is under the sanctions. Pink ponies. Orthodox priest Sergei Baranov claimed Russian children are becoming idiots because mothers show them blind love instead of discipline. Okay. Yay. Let's talk another royal, Prince William. He launched Global Humanitarian Memorial today. In Gunsbury Park, Prince William inaugurated the Global Humanitarian Memorial, dedicated to honoring aid workers and humanitarian contributions worldwide. And do I have a video? I think I do. Maybe. No, I don't. But anyway, he had a beautiful speech, and I did include that in your newsletter that will come right away after this live stream. So, and if you're not subscribed, why not? It has no paywall. It has, just read, get actual news every day, Monday through Friday. Sunday, no politics. We talk about culture, arts, food, dishes, whatnot. Join. Okay, please. And if you can like this and subscribe to the channel, it would be bombastic, because then you, first of all, don't miss out on the news, but then also others will get the recommendations, right? You know, like, you know, this, and then, so it spreads. So that would be great if factual information and news would be spreading. Now, security developments in Europe. In Germany, authorities arrested 3 suspected Hamas operatives, allegedly preparing a serious act of violence. And in France, as I mentioned, special forces seize Russian tanker. Now, Trump on Monday signed something that we didn't know about at all. This happened when Netanyahu was visiting the White House. And remember Netanyahu being made to, forced to apologize to Qatar for bombing them, even though Trump greenlit this, according to Netanyahu, all that story. So Trump did sign this agreement, which then was published today on Wednesday. It's an executive order. it goes into effect right away, can be overturned by next president. It pledges that the U.S. will treat any armed attack on Qatar as a threat to U.S. security. So with Qatar, we have our own Article 5, so to speak. The order was dated that the day Trump hosted Netanyahu. Qatar, home of the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East, has mediated between Israel, Hamas, and Washington throughout the Gaza conflict. In the order, it says the United States shall regard any armed attack on the territory, sovereignty, and crucial or critical infrastructure of the state of Qatar as a threat to the peace and security of the United States. While this echoes NATO-style guarantees, an executive order lacks Senate ratification and could be repealed by any future president. The move exceeds Biden's 2022 designation of Qatar as major non-NATO ally. That's the same thing that he extended to IP4, our partners in Indo-Pacific. Now, as the context. The pledge follows Israeli airstrike in Doha last month that nearly killed Hamas leaders and rattled Washington. Even though, again, Netanyahu says this was greenlit by Washington. Saudi Arabia, seeking similar U.S. guarantees, recently signed a mutual defense pact with Pakistan instead. We didn't give that to Saudi Arabia. They signed with Pakistan. Pakistan is against India. Yes? If you ask me, I think it has all to do with that plane from Qatar. But that's my humble, injection into this reporting. So, UN is expanding Haiti mission. UN Security Council voted to expand international mission in Haiti from 1,000 to 5,000 personnel, responding to requests from Haiti's transitional government. The US and Panama spearheaded the initiative. And of course, France was actually supporting this as well, as much as Canada too. China has new policies. Beijing launched a new visa to attract foreign tech talent. I talked yesterday about it, where you don't have to have a specific offer. Now it gets even better. It doesn't require any employer sponsorship. All you have to do is show that you have a degree in IT, engineering, math, chemical, anything, right? Physics, and you will get this work visa right away. Foreign institutional investors may now also trade stock options in China, part of efforts to boost yen internationalization. Yeah. And that's the whole point here, because as long as China is operating in dollars, mostly, they can't proclaim themselves as that big superpower that they want to become instead or in place of United States. So this is a major development here. And also yesterday I reported that in addition to those work visas, they also will grant up to $702,000 for any housing for this kind of employees. So certainly attracting everyone. Now, also the H-1B with the reported by international watchdogs, so to speak, that the H-1B applicants in U.S. are now turning more towards India. And in return from India, the European Union is trying to attract them to Europe, essentially, just getting this major talent in IT and whatnot, in tech altogether to the continent. As to Japan and South Korea, leaders of Japan and South Korea held their second summit in 2 months, pledging to maintain close ties through Japan's upcoming leadership transition. The approachment crosses party lines in Seoul, strengthening long-strange relations. And by the way, Trump will be soon in Japan and South Korea and in Malaysia. And Taiwan rejected U.S. chip proposal, which was obnoxious to begin with. Taiwan's Vice Premier Chang Li-chun rejected U.S. proposal to produce half of Taiwan's chips in the United States. Washington had framed it as part of reshoring efforts, but Taipei insisted domestic production remains non-negotiable. Trump has pledged tariffs on chip imports with exemptions for companies that manufacture in the U.S. And this is, I mean, if you watch my interview, I will skip pointing to it. It's just 11 minutes. Please watch it or read it. I even have a readout with the senior advisor to National Security Council, Dr. Lee. And he said, look, the chip production and us being so well versed in semiconductors, this is our essential part of national security. That is what prohibits China from destroying everything in Taiwan. They want to take it over. They don't want to destroy. That's what's different between Russia versus Ukraine and China versus Taiwan. They want to seize it. They want to own it. They don't want to destroy. Now, if you start producing in the United States, bringing the know-how, so to speak, to America, then it opens the gates for China to do whatever they want. So they did not agree to that. Now, and lastly, there's a disaster in the Philippines. 6.9 magnitude earthquake struck the central Philippines Tuesday night, killing at least 60 people and injuring more than 150. The quake hit west of Palampan. Sorry for butchering it, causing building collapses and widespread debris. Over 500,000 people felt strong shaking across the islands, Cebu, Biliran, and Leyte. Emergency services are carrying out door-to-door searches with troops, police, and volunteers racing to find survivors. And that's it. As to the White House, that golden Hobby Lobby thing is spreading outdoors. That's the latest. And it's outdoors. Like, it's in Washington, D.C. So all this stuff starts falling down soon because it starts getting colder and they just, yeah. I mean, it's a Hobby Lobby thing. It's not. Anyway, on this note, I wanted to share a quote of by Pope Leo that he actually stated yesterday. He says, quote, "Someone who says I'm against abortion but says I'm in favor of death penalty is not really pro-life. Someone who says that I'm against abortion but I'm in agreement with the inhuman treatment of immigrants who are in the United States. I don't know if that's pro-life." And this is a very direct hit to this administration. And I referred to that yesterday, but I wanted to feature the exact quote. Yes. So on this note, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your patience. Indeed, rest in peace, Jane Goodall. And we began with that. And yeah, I really suggest you to watch the documentary. I'll feature it again in Sunday edition. I think it was there 2 weeks ago with links to her documentary. Watch it. Such a special human being. And just being in her proximity just felt special in all the good ways. James says, Tanglin alliance with Qatar just cost them an old jet, right? The administration is like really bad. American mafia. Yeah, indeed. I agree. Okay, guys, thank you so much for being here. See you tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. We'll be back on schedule. It was just a travel day. You see, different background. So I'll see you tomorrow. Have a peaceful night. Keep your head on a swivel. It's a marathon. So do something that makes you feel better so you can take care of others. Okay? Have a good night. See you tomorrow.